Good evening and welcome. I'm going to call to order the Mercer Island Schools and City Council linkage meeting. Allie, could you please call roll?
Excuse me. Councilmember Tom Acker. Present. Councilmember Bruce Bassett. Here. Councilmember Wendy Weicker. Councilmember David Wiesentiner. Councilmember Benson Wong. Here. Deputy Mayor Salim Neese.
Here.
Mayor Debbie Bertlin.
Here.
Do you want to call roll for you guys, or? No. Yep. I don't have your list.
Yeah. It's not on.
We can maybe stretch.
Can try again. See if it's working now.
Testing. Yeah, that sounds better. Hi, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here tonight for this joint meeting. We have a tight timetable. Apparently there's another meeting at 7, so we need to be wrapped up by 6:45. I just want to make sure everyone is aware of that. The purpose of this special meeting is to conduct a joint meeting and study session with the City Council and Mercer Island School Board about topics of mutual interest regarding K-12 public education, health and safety, transportation, and budget projections. And you've all got an agenda, so we will get started right away on number 1, sustainability.
So, Julie, I think we were just going to have some brief remarks in terms of how the city is approaching sustainability and where it shows up on our council objectives.
Thank you, Mayor Bertlin. In your packet, you'll see the council has a 2018-19 goals and work plan, and one of the action items under that is invite the school district's participation under this goal. The goal being really deepen the city's commitment to sustainability and livability. And in addition, I want to call out under that, working with, hopefully we can work with the district to create a 6-year sustainability plan, and also work with us as we start to look at adopting the STAR Communities Framework. And STAR actually stands for Sustainable Tools for Assessing and Rating, and it's a number of factors. You should also have that in your packet as well. The city is just beginning to explore that and learn more about that and really evaluate how effective we are doing in those areas. I think there's like 40 different objectives, so we're just starting that ourselves. So we really have an interest in working and cooperatively partnering with the district on some of those efforts that we're involved in. So wanted to really start the conversation there.
Thank you very much. And I know the school district is already working on some of these things, though not in the same framework, but I think it will mesh nicely with what a lot of things that we're already doing. And I know our Superintendent Kolosky was going to comment on a few of the items that we have recently achieved.
So Mercer Island School District has for several years been involved in the King County Green Schools program. In fact, every one of our schools is recognized as a green school, and just recently the district has been recognized also in this program as a green school district. There's different levels of sustainability in this program that is, of course, about schools. That's why it's the Green School Initiative. And it encompasses waste reduction, energy conservation, water conservation, transportation education, and environmental education. Our Lake Ridge was honored as a National Green Ribbon School in 2017 by the U.S. Department of Education, and it has really been the school that has spearheaded the entire Green Schools program across the district. They were honored for their innovative efforts to reduce environmental impact and utility costs, improve health and wellness, and ensure effective sustainability education. And only 2 Washington State schools were selected, so we're pretty proud of that. They first formed their green team in 2009, and it really was spearheaded by a parent who has now coordinated our issues across the district, Nancy Weil, and along with teacher Heather McLyman. They, along with the entire school district, participate in an energy benchmarking program run by Spark Buildings in Seattle. And our M&O department uses this program to obtain energy use numbers and find ways to reduce usage even further. One example is all indoor and outdoor light bulbs have been replaced with LED lights. Students learn the importance of energy monitoring and turning off computers, appliances, and other equipment when not in use. And many of our classrooms have light timers and sensors. Our water conservation efforts consist of student educational programs, and we've recently added low-flow faucets in our restrooms and classrooms to reduce water usage by almost 20%. Our PTAs are very active in supporting the school's green teams by helping to educate parents about sustainability. We have lessons with everything from packing waste-free lunches to running zero-waste classroom parties and school events. Our PTA room parents help with compost bins and party supplies. So we're making every effort to be zero waste, have zero waste events. In September, Lake Ridge hosts re-education on being a green school, and this year featuring a new student-created video on the danger of plastics in the ocean. We offer Earth Week celebration that involves a different activity each day, and students are also members of the Green Team, and they share daily Green Team tips and go around the school daily to collect recyclable materials from all classrooms and visits classrooms to promote conservation practices. And they have started a contest to engage students in conservation actions. So all grades have the opportunity to work and plant in our school gardens at the elementary school. And Lake Ridge, in fact, produce from the garden has been donated to the Mercer Island Youth and Family Services Food Pantry. So we are at all different levels within the Green School program. Lake Ridge is a sustainable level. Every school is level 2 or better, even our newest school, Northwood. And we also have become a district because of our energy conservation, and we included in the packet some charts that we had shared with the board that we were pretty pleased with that showed how we've been able to really improve our energy consumption, particularly at our new buildings, the new building at IMS and at Northwood. And so those graphs are included in your packet as well. If you have any questions about the graphs, I'll probably have to defer to Tony because he can explain them better than I can.
I'm not sure who. Donna, thank you. You know, I'm just curious with the change by China as far as recycling or accepting recycled materials. Has the school done anything different in terms of education or reach out, teaching the students, I guess, the changes in recycling? I mean, we actually had a conference here on the island where you had Republic and other King County solid waste people come out and talk about the changes that have been impacted because of the change in China. Just curious whether or not you folks have taken that into account in terms of educating your students.
So it's all embedded in the Green Schools program and is part of the curriculum that they update and work with Republic and other recycling agencies.
One thing I would like to point out, actually, under this council goal, you see an early consideration of the styrofoam container ban. You know, hats off to our Lake Ridge students, right? They came out and did a great presentation, a great, really making a great point for us, the city, considering a ban. So it's on there for consideration, and obviously it's really, the work you're doing is real impactful. I have a second grader who comes home and tells me I should ban styrofoam as well. So it's working. It's working.
If I could, I nudged this item in our priority list a bit along because I thought let me go back and give a little bit of history first. So as before, I think any of you are involved in city council or school board, we actually ran a challenge between city council members and school board members to try to do carbon footprint reduction. And it ended up not really panning out. Yes, you were there. You were there in those days. We ended up shifting that and doing a couple of other challenges, including the one we did with the community to try and encourage citizens to reduce their footprints. And as part of that, I'm going to pass out a piece that I had Ross put together with sustainability subcommittee folks. That talks. It's more of a sort of a takeaway than anything you should try and read right now. But I want to go in a couple of different directions. So first, the city ran a challenge with citizens a few years ago to encourage them to sign up for green power with PSE, which turned out pretty well. We had a significant number of folks sign up. We went from 480 homes that were enrolled up to a total of 750 over the course of that campaign. We also at that time agreed that we as a city were going to go to 100% green power for the city operations. It was interesting to me, one or more school board members suggested that there might have been a different approach we might have taken, where we proposed that we would implement green power within city operations to the same extent that our citizens adopted it, sort of a way to motivate them towards greater action, because we would then amplify whatever they did. I liked that the school board members suggested that, and would love to propose that the school board perhaps take on doing exactly that with your operations, challenge parents. I think you're in a particularly, and Julie points it out, a particularly powerful position in that you've got kids who really are, the ones who more than anything have the ability to influence parental behavior. And if kids are to say, hey, parents, if we sign up for green power, we are reducing our footprint, and not only that, the school district will match the impact that we're having. I think there's the benefit, or there's the potential for a significant further gain in what the community is doing in that respect. So I'm very gently and politely throwing a challenge to you that here's an opportunity for you to consider doing something that we've done before in one way, do it in the way that you think makes sense, and we'd love to see it be another success. So that's one of the pieces that's embedded in this sheet that you can take away. The second is, and this is kind of at the top of page 1, is this idea of signing up for green power. Now, as an institution, what we've done, as you're aware, I think, is to sign up for this Green Direct program, which is one in which we actually tie our energy directly to a wind farm that's going to be built by PSE, and that has the benefit of guaranteeing us controlled rate increases over the coming, I think it's 20 years for which we've signed up for that power. I think there's an opportunity there for the district to consider in one of the further iterations of this, signing up for your energy needs as well, if you chose to. But I think it would be a great thing for you to consider doing. Several cities, several large corporations are all in this program at this point. And then the final thing I'll mention, I loved that this data that you mentioned, the Smart Cities Center in Sierra, the Smart Building Center, and the work that you're doing there. We have been working, city staff's been working to advance that same intent with our buildings. There was, for a while, a back and forth, I think, between our staff and yours to advance that. And then it kind of went quiet, and we weren't, as far as I could tell, sure where the school district was on it. You've moved ahead. We just didn't talk about it. And I think getting Tony and our folks talking again would be a good thing, because we would want to share the data that we've got and make sure it matches up with yours. I think our old buildings don't fare nearly as well as your new buildings, but that's part of the learning that goes on. And so having that communication go on, I think is a good thing. I will stop there. Tracy's been tapping her watch.
Well,
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you for your comments.
Well, I think what I'm taking away, or I think a question actually that's being asked potentially through this action item where it says invite school district participation is, as Bruce said, politely sort of throwing out a little bit of a challenge there, the extent to which the district and the board would want to sit down and have some further conversations, be it according to your framework or be it the STAR framework in terms of initiatives that we would want to pursue together, through avenue of the kids and the parents and or the community as a whole. I mean, I look at emergency preparedness and response. Clearly, that's one that we are doing. Social and cultural diversity, there's been some loose conversations there. So I think I would love to hear more, be it in the coming weeks and or even at that next meeting that we have next fall, in terms of ideas that the district might have and or additional council members might have in terms of how we partner together and move the community forward.
Or we might also have just another special meeting where we just focus on this one topic, since I think it could take us a lot more time. But given that we have 3 more topics, was there one more comment you wanted to make?
Yeah, I just wanted to address some of this. I appreciate the comments. I think speaking as an individual board member, I just want to borrow a term. I think environmentalism is in our DNA. And, if you look at the new construction, there's at least over 100 planted trees at IMS in Northwood. There's living roofs, which is good for stormwater. Native drought-tolerant plantings. Stormwater retention vaults at IMS in Northwood. I think we have the largest solar installation with the 2 100-kilowatt solar arrays, so that's about 800 panels. If you haven't seen it already, a super awesome kiosk at Northwood and IMS, which is interactive for the kids and adults to see the solar production historically and currently, as well as water consumption. All LED lighting, the new stadium LED lighting coming online this summer. We were informed by Brandy and Tony that Mary Waite is being looked at, and McKinstry, which has done a lot of work with the other forward thrust pools, will be doing essentially an energy audit, and there's an opportunity there maybe for solar panels or solar water heating, as well as installation, et cetera. My concern is twofold. One is all I've mentioned right now is just one of 10 elements or 8 elements of the framework, which is referred to as STAR. So, and as a school district, we've got IEPs, we've got national standards, we have 504s, we have 4,300 children, which are the most precious to all the parents, and we've got tons of compliance laws, a lot of paperwork. We also have our own operating system that is called our fundamentals, which is just a really wonderful composite of our goals for our students and ourselves. And right now we've been engaged in a workshop to update that. And I think it's wonderful that the school district has been very involved on the environmental, but I wouldn't want to hamstring it with an additional overlay to put on top of our superintendent and staff, if that makes sense. So that's just one thought, because I think we're doing pretty good already, and there's also resources out there that we pull upon, like the Seattle Design Lighting Lab, which is funded by PSC and Patel and the region to share information to entities like us. So I think we're taking advantage of it. I'm just concerned about additional reporting responsibilities on our district.
Okay, I think if we want to have further discussion on this, we need to try to schedule our next meeting, but I appreciate everybody's comments here, and I think we're both working on it, and I think maybe in our monthly leadership meetings we can also update each other on some of the other items. Is that okay if we move on to the next agenda item? Okay.
So next item is emergency planning, and I think there's a fair amount of update and inform that's going on here, and with that, I'll turn it over to Julie to start off with the facilities agreement.
Yes, in your packet, there is an agreement between the district and the city. It's really a great example of the cooperation that we have between our two agencies. And really, actually, our chief can probably talk more about this, but it's another example of us working together on really a common purpose, a common goal. And so using the middle school as a potential shelter is great because we had other potential ones out there. But this one really does serve, I think, as a great potential site for sheltering. The other piece that's actually also in your packet is a joint letter by our superintendent, our police chief, and Cindy going out to the community. I know I heard a lot of positive responses from parents about this, kind of feeling like there was, during all that period, I think there was a lot of unknowns and what's going to happen. And so I just want to applaud our team for really working together and really communicating with our community about how we're working together jointly and on this. So, I think this is one of those where it's working really well. It's working really, that's not to say though that when there is an event on school district property, we are supporting that event. We are not going to come in and take over. It's you're responsible for the kids, and we respect that, and we want to. So it really comes down to we support you in that effort, and I think we just want to continue, and we have been continuing to work together, communicate, and I think, again, in my view, that's really going very, very well. And I feel as a parent in the school district, like my kids are I feel they're safe. So, and I think because of the work that our police department and YFS and the district have done. So, I don't know, Chief Holmes, do you have anything you'd like to add about the working relationship?
Well, if you give me a chance to talk, I guess I'll take it. So,
60 seconds.
yes. Other than just to reaffirm what you said, and back 20-some years ago when I was the first SRO that the district and the city had in common, a joint effort. Even back then, I could see the relationship we had. We had the DARE program before that, and this facility down at IMS as a shelter is just another great example. We tried to make a different facility work for a while when IMS was going to be remodeled. We knew it was going to be remodeled, so we pushed pause on partnering at that time. But since the remodel's complete, the timing has been great. And, working with Tony on facilities and your other staff at the school, I just can't say enough good about that. And it's always hard to have the discussion about safety and how do you balance the learning environment with safety. And we talk about, you can go from the extreme of barbed wire and metal detectors, and at what point do you stop the conversation and say what we have, it may not be perfect because there is no such thing as a perfect system out there, but it's the right mix, if you will, the right balance of precautions and programs with the counselors in the schools and the drills we do with lockdown drills and whatnot. It seems to be a good balance and the right mix in the conversations I've had with the superintendent. It's landed in a pretty good place. Is it perfect? No. And is there an ongoing discussion? Absolutely. And so it's very nice to work in an environment where we're welcomed in the schools, and it really is the partnership. So,
Thank you very much. And thank you to everybody who's involved in that partnership. I think it is one of our greatest assets we have right now.
So the next topic is transportation, and we've got a couple elements here. The first one being student parking at MIHS, then safe routes, and an update, is what's going on in the TIP, and then, of course, the city rideshare pilot and some good things like that. I'm going to I can cover it, or Julie can cover it, because we received, as you probably well aware, we received a petition from high school students, 600 high school students who are very interested in seeing additional parking opportunities, namely within the neighborhoods, and having us lift those restrictions. So when that petition was presented to us late in April, City Manager Underwood broke with a little bit of public comment tradition and provided some, I'd say, some feedback with regard to how we manage those jointly with the school district. And subsequently, provided written comment to the high school publication, et cetera. But Julie, do you want to just elaborate, I think, for the sake of the full school board and audience, in terms of how we partner with the district in terms of parking issues?
Right,
in high
and
school?
it's probably no surprise that you all have to have a transportation demand management plan. And that's currently what's in place. And I think you've done, a pretty good job of trying to recognizing you don't have enough. So you're doing other things like Orca cards and encouraging the students to carpool and that sort of thing. There is still parking, we know, at near St. Monica's, right? And for some of the students, they'd like to be much closer. We recognize that. But we've expressed to them it's really important that we work with the district on this. It's also really important that we work with our residents in the neighborhoods who are impacted by the parking. And so I know Mayor Bertland has really tried to educate the students about how long a problem this has been. And I've had really great conversations with Donna really about priorities. Are you really going to spend money building a parking garage? No, not likely. But at the same time, is the city really going to have parking on the streets when, for our residents, it impacts them in many, many ways. So we want to find that balance, but certainly we're continuing to work with the district on this, and I have a feeling it's going to just be an ongoing concern that we'll just continue to work with.
So there is actually more parking available for students than there was prior to Northwood being open. So there was some misconception of by opening that school there was decreased student parking. That's actually inaccurate. And we've even increased this year since that time as well. Students do have to go through a parking pass process, and every senior who applied for a parking pass received one. There were some juniors who were not able to get parking passes. This is an ongoing issue for every high school in the nation. I've actually dealt with this parking issue in other districts and high schools as well. And it always seems to burble up in spring when you have a new set of 16-year-olds who become drivers and want the privilege of driving to school. And of course, they couldn't get parking passes in the fall because they weren't eligible to drive. So this is an ongoing concern for every high school. Yes, we do provide Orca passes. We have worked with students. This year we had 2 Running Start students who came to the administration. One was morning Running Start and needed to be on campus in the afternoon, and the other one had the opposite schedule, and they said, can we share a parking pass and a parking stall? And we said, absolutely, that's a great problem-solving solution. We can support that. And so administration is going to put that information out there for the few Running Start students that do fit into that schedule. Yes, we have Orca passes for students to ride buses to and from. So particularly in light of the fact that we were just talking about carbon footprint and less vehicles and how car-centric do we really want to be, I think it's important to really inform our students of that. As new drivers, they have a responsibility to make sure that they're valuing that privilege, that it's not necessarily a right, but a privilege. And so I've had conversation with the student who started the petition, and made some suggestions for her to really dive deeper into her problem and not just present the problem, but perhaps what might some solutions be, some very specific solutions. So perhaps the City Council will hear back, or we at the school district will. So again, it's an ongoing issue, and we continue to do our best to make sure that students have access.
I just had one question on this topic. Has anything changed that created a problem? And the only reason I ask is we had North Mercer Junior High, we had Mercer Crest Elementary, and we had the high school all right there, and Mary Waite Pool was still there. And we had higher enrollment in the high school back when I went there. So is it just an indicator of more kids have cars now than we did in the 70s? Sorry, a while ago. But then is it just the culture has changed where people drive? Is that what's driving this issue?
I can't address how it was when you were in school, but I know at my school when I was there, when I was in high school, I remember being one of those students who was upset because I didn't get a parking pass. So I really truly believe that this is part and parcel of a high school. Kids become drivers in high school, and they're excited about it. It's something they want to be able to do, and I'm a parent as well. It becomes really convenient for parents when your kids can take care of the transportation themselves, but we have to look at alternatives for them too.
Yeah, I get that. I just wondered if, like, the footprint of parking that used to be there shrunk, or has anything, well, Tony, you grew up there.
Well, a couple things.
Tony and I grew up together. He's almost as old as I am.
Almost. The big change happened when we did the remodel. We had the 96 SEPA. So when we did the 96 SEPA, we reviewed, the whole footprint of the community. Again, going back to the good neighbors, we took out the parking strip along 42nd. Remember, that was all parking along there, and there was quite a bit of parking, actually. And then when the 96 SEPA came through, we were required to maintain 247 stalls. I honestly don't know how that number came to be. I wasn't part of that. But that's the number that I've been given, and we followed since then. The North Mercer parking lot was a little deceiving back when it was there. We had a certain amount of spots there for the students. Of course, they bled out into Youth Theater and Country Village, and we were constantly battling that because there was open parking there, although it wasn't slated for the students. Northwood, as Donna said, I think we picked up 11 more student parking stalls in that process. So.
May I just add one thing? Having grown up between the high school and the library, I was very familiar with the parking issue even back then. It's always been a challenge. One thing I'd recommend to our students who are entrepreneurial and problem solvers, we have a great community. We have a lot of people live around the high school, and I bet you if you knocked on a door, introduced yourself, you might find a house that would be interested in a barter. Maybe you could mow their lawn. Maybe you could take out their trash when you're parking their car. So maybe reach out and see if you could work out a deal.
Benson?
I just had a comment. I really appreciate the initiative and the energy that the students put forward, coming forward with the petition. I'm not quite sure where the process is right now. Donna, you talked about talking with the student that started the petition, but is there going to be, are you planning to meet again, or is it sort of up to the students to come back and then present ideas, or so is that where it's left, I guess?
It really is with the student to take this through process. Again, anything on the city is related to the city's transportation plan. We as a school district continue to evolve our parking with suggestions from the students, such as the running start sharing of spots. But in my conversation with the student earlier this week, it was the school district isn't going to ask the city to open up residential parking. That's a huge process, just as it was explained to the student by city council, but that we will continue to look at what we can control on campus, and suggested some problem solving and entrepreneurial innovative ideas that if she brought those back, perhaps there'd be some interest.
I just want to make sure that they feel that they've been heard, and it's still open, at least a discussion can occur, and so, thank you.
Thank you. I think we're on to our,
Well, we have.
or do we have one more? Oh, we have the
a couple
safe
more.
route.
We
That's
have
right.
safe routes to school, and I think, Julie, do you want to give an update in terms of what some of those key projects are through the TIP and beyond?
Yeah, so again, we really appreciate working with district staff and helping us identify proposals that we submit to the council for their consideration. What you have in your packet is the list of projects and there are many more. I just tried to highlight a few that are directly maybe impactful for our students. The Safe Routes to School projects. There's also a speed feedback signing, very similar to what you have at the middle school, again, to try to improve public safety. And then there are some unfunded projects as well that's in the TIP as just, in the agenda bill as noted. And so, again, we often rely on you to give us feedback on whether or not one project should be a greater priority over another. So we really try to have our project lists reflect your input, your staff's input. And then I just want to call out, really excited to see Southeast 40th Street corridor improvements. It's a big ticket item. It's hard to believe that bike ped projects are in the $2 million, but they are. Especially when you consider surface water and all that. So this is exciting because we are using other people's money for this project. So $500,000 is coming from the Transportation Improvement Board. And so excited to see that. That will be happening really very soon. I think we'll probably be mobilizing here this summer. So excited to see that one.
I think it's also a heads up to drivers that 40th over the course of the summer, for all of the schools aren't in session, there's going to be a fair amount of work going on.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk a bit about safe routes to school and kind of the conundrum of parking and on-street parking. I also grew up between the library and the high school on 89th and 42nd. I was enterprising, and I was able to barter some parking spots for some services. And so a lot of people parked there, but back in the day, you had a lot of street parking, and you had open ditches, and you had sidewalks that were on the outsides of the ditches, and you have all ages of children around that block. And so when we think about safe routes to school, we think about putting in sidewalks and infrastructure so people can walk and safely, especially with young kids, and I have a 2-year-old. These things don't really coexist very well. And those streets are fairly narrow, and a lot of when we think about life safety issues, especially the fire trucks, getting through those streets when there's cars parked. You've seen it on a ball night game, a football night. It's very difficult to navigate those streets, and it's very dangerous for little kids and any kids really running around. So, but I would say that kind of hearkening back to STAR and thinking about sustainability, some of the thoughts that I have on that are that these things, when we have these conversations about single kind of siloed issues, and we don't draw the connections to how they relate to one another, how life safety connects with safe routes to school, with equity. These are the things that STAR really gives to me. And so you may not look at the comprehensive overlay and say this is something valuable as a management tool, but the connectedness of these issues, when we think about, you ran through your list of sustainability and you talked about it in a very literal sense of the environment. But when we think about sustainability, at least when I do, I like to think about inputs in and inputs out. And can we have systems that coexist that can run on the inputs that are here today that will also serve that system tomorrow without more inputs? And so I hope that there's a way to work together with the school district to kind of expand those definitions, expand how we think about sustainability, and look at these areas, particularly things like safe routes to school and parks and some of the optimizations that we could have to show people that we can continue as an island to sustain around these things. Joint maintenance and how we look at our fleet and maintain our fleets. These types of things are no-brainers, but they require kind of a heightened level of efficiency and interaction and awareness. And so when I see students, particularly like a petition of 800 students to park on the streets, I think is there a message that we're not sending in the school district, in the community about sustainability? The gal that started that said that she lives on 47th. 47th is Ellis Pond area, right? That cross section of the island, and I would think that's a natural walk. But I understand also she had after school activities and things that drew her elsewhere on the island and frantic schedules. So maybe we look at those after school programs and their locations or co-locations, and how do we make people's movements have less impact in the environment, with other people's interactions, less collisions, those types of things to create some optimization. So just a couple thoughts.
Brian?
If I could just say one thing, being a West Mercer parent, to see on here that work is being done on 40th, and that work in West Mercer Way with adjusting the signage, deep appreciation for that. I know it's really challenging for our students to make that small trek across the street in West Mercer Way. Those are tight curves. It's a dangerous area. I know busing accommodations have happened for students who normally it would be a very easy walk. So I really appreciate that you're looking at that, you're investing in it, and really making that difference for those families and those students. Thank you.
Julie, you were...
No, I was just wondering, in the interest of time, we have a great flyer. Please encourage your staff to use our pilot program. So, okay.
Super. And I think just one, are we talking about the fact that we're hoping also to have a Lime Bike, e-bike pilot? Which
yes, we are in talks with Lime Bike to potentially add some e-bikes for our residents to hop on anywhere and take anywhere on the island. So stay tuned.
I'm sorry, it sounds like you're going to sort of slide right by the Lyft Uber program, but it felt like this was something, was somebody going to talk more about it, or were we?
I wasn't.
Okay, so I'm going to highlight it just because I know the school district has highlighted this need to get teachers from potentially the park and ride to the school. Lyft and Uber for $2 a ride would get them there, and I would certainly encourage it during this 6-month period, the idea of them at least trying it and giving us feedback as to whether it's a viable approach for them or not, and if not, why not, and if so, you know, what do they like about it? How does it work? Because pilot period will come to an end in the fall, and we'll have to decide where we're going from there. And the more input we've got, and of course the more positive input, the more likely we are to decide to carry that on.
Is that to free up parking for students, Bruce?
Unfortunately, this is for 18 or over, for at least to add. Actually,
I raise it because the school district did
Yeah.
come to us and say, how do we get teachers from park and ride to school? And here is an option.
Is the district actually marketing this to the teachers and administration?
Yes, see nodding heads, yes.
Yeah, because I mean, I just concur with what Bruce says. I think it's an interesting point is to find out the extent to which they find that, you know, useful, helpful, compelling, or the opposite thereof. But yeah, that would be great.
Thank you. Okay. Are we ready to move on?
Yes.
Next item is the budget.
All right. Well, first of all, let me start off by saying thank you for your letter. We did receive it. I was able to actually pass it along to our community advisory group as well. So they also were able to take a look at that and consider your input on that letter as well. We are now working with staff and beginning to kick off our Biennium budget process. So this is the budget for 19 and 20. And the conversation that we've had with the community has really been around kind of our long-term projection. So by law, we have to provide a 6-year projection. And as you know, I'm sure Donna and Ty know this very well, as you get further out, it becomes more and more challenging to really nail down what should that forecast and that projection look like. Nevertheless, we have that available. I know Chip's here to provide you with an overview. And we spent a lot of time with our community advisory group. I mean, 15 hours just with them. And thank you, Donna, for serving on the CAG. as a representative to the district. One of the things we really highlighted was, of course, we have our total budget, it's around 65 million, but we're really focused on the operating budget, which is roughly 30 million. And so we focus a great deal on the operating budget, but also a great deal on the YFS fund. I mean, a tremendous amount on the YFS fund. And as we went through that process, and I recognize that you have an interest in looking at a, perhaps, as your letter noted, a measure that would just include YFS or mental health counselors or something to that effect. And I know that was discussed, maybe not formally discussed at the CAG. And some of that has to do with, I really try to have that process be organic. I really tried to have that process be, as much as possible, really CAG driven. We were coming to them saying, hey, this is our set of problems. This is what we're projecting. And actually through that process, the staff ended up really we modified what we were coming in there with because of the great input our community had. So, and one of the things that came up, of course, was how are we going to do this? How are we really going to sustain our services? And so a lot of conversation out there in the community, I'm sure you've heard. But one of the things, I'll just get to the punchline here, is that our community advisory group, the majority of them said the city should consider, the council should consider, the city manager should consider a levy lid lift to balance the budget. So at this point, what is covered in the levy lid lift, we did not really get into, because again, I think their overarching interest in this exercise was maintaining service levels. So that was a big part of the conversation as well, because I've got to prepare a balanced budget. It's not going to be a deficit budget. We're not doing that. And because we're talking in 19, 1.8 million projected deficit, either we've got to find a way to raise revenue, or we have to cut services. So another potential, you can spend down savings. No financial advisor or director in the state would probably advise that, because it's one-time money and you don't use that money for operations. So, we're at this place now where we're trying to sort it out. And I know Chip has some slides to share with you around our projections. I don't know, would you like to take a moment? I know I'm nervous about the time, but what do you?
His slides are not in in our packet, right?
We'd have to pull it up. We can pull it up. Much of the slides are really a repeat of council's meeting on Tuesday night. So I know for the council, this will be something they've already seen. So do you want to cover it?
Well, I thought Ty was going to go first.
Oh,
well, maybe because Ty's slides are up.
Oh, you want to do that first?
It's up to the.
Go for it, Ty. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that, Ty.
Good evening. We'd like to provide just a brief update as to what we're looking at in terms of state funding as we move forward into this brave new world of post-McCleary. So there's been a lot of chatter about McCleary and the Senate bills and the House bills that came out, and all these supplemental budgets. There is more money coming to the district, but we are losing money in our levy lid, in our levy caps. The money that is coming for us is slated for salaries. Initially, our projection was for 18-19 was about $5 million more dollars than 17-18. Sorry, there's so many years. $5 million more than 17-18, with the Supreme Court coming out and saying you don't have 2 years to fund salaries, you have 1 year to fund salaries. The phase-in, the 2-year phase-in that was in the original bill was accelerated into a 1-year phase-in. So there's about $3 million more dollars that we're looking at that is essentially going to be kind of a one-time money for us. There will be ongoing increases in funding, but this one jump represents kind of a one-time jag in our funding because as our levy is decreasing, we overlap levy years. So we're going from a larger levy under our old formula to a significantly reduced levy under the new formula. Previously, we're collecting about $1, I want to say about $1.26 per thousand. We're now looking at about 75 cents per thousand. And that equates to about $5 to $6 million a year. We will be, and the money that's coming to us from the state is really dedicated for instructional and leadership and classified staffing salaries. It's not money that's being allocated to us for additional staffing. It's not money that's being allocated to us for additional programming. This is the state saying, these are the staff that we've allocated to you according to our model, and we are fully funding you according to our model. Well, the model doesn't provide what our community has defined as basic education. We are staffed significantly higher than what the state provides us. If we just want to look at nurses alone, we are apportioned by the state less than 1 nurse for the entire district. And we have six nurses in all of our buildings. And that's a significant expense for us. So while we are getting more money to fully fund the salaries that we have, it doesn't equate to the money that we will be spending on the rest of our staff to fund. Additionally, beginning in 1819, we will be getting 1 additional day of professional development funds, and that will increase over time. This will be supplanting money that we will have been using out of our levy to fund our days. Difficult consideration for us this year, there is a 1-year cap on compensation of 3.1% that matches to the CPI. After that, there is no more cap. Another issue that we need to consider while we're looking at the changes to the supplemental levy is that while our expenditures are being capped and measured in CPI as an inflationary measure, we will be funded at IPD, which is a significantly less measure of inflation. So they're saying, we'll inflate what we give you, but we're allowing you to spend more than we give you. IPD is the implicit price deflator. It's a more diluted measure of inflation that rolls in measures from manufacturing and other trade measures, essentially. CPI is much more consumer-based, more standard of living based. So our staffing allocations, previously under the old formula for how we were funded, we had a grid, a salary allocation model grid that, depending on where the average experience and education of our teachers was, we would land somewhere on that and we'd be funded according to that. That is now gone. So we will no longer be funded for our experience and our education for our teachers. We will just get a single straight allocation of about $65,000, which will be inflated by the IPD every year. Additionally, we will have straight allocations for our certificate administrators and our classified staff. these are just brief comparisons of revenue. The yellow box, the yellow column is the old model pre-House Bill 2242. This is the pre-McCleary fix revenues. Post-McCleary fix, which is the blue box, the 2242, and then the supplemental budget, which was just passed this year, is the green box. So if we're looking at the per pupil, we do see increases on a per student basis for increased salaries to our staff. One thing that we need to consider is that we gave our staff significant increases last year. So we went ahead of most districts in the state in terms of funding them the larger increases. One thing that came along with the McCleary fix is that we now have floors and ceilings for compensation. No teacher can be making less than $40,000, and adjusted for inflation and regionalization, which is another great topic. And no teacher can make more than $90,000 adjusted for inflation and regionalization. We are now within those fence posts after having made our agreement with the teachers last year. So a lot of the money that we are planning on receiving is essentially backfilling what we've already given to our staff. This graphically just represents what the change in funding due to the supplemental budget looks like. The dotted lines here represent what funding would look like under 2242, which was the bill passed last summer. And the darker solid lines represent the supplemental budget, which was passed earlier this year. And as we look at the total per student revenue, we see this uptick due to the 17-18 school year where we're being funded upfront, and then we see the decrease, and then it essentially plateaus. So there's this one-time spike of funding before we lose our levy capacity completely, and we get more money from the state. And then just some additional assumptions, planning updates. We had no changes to our initial projection of FTE, and we are continuing to monitor our enrollment and kindergarten registration to make sure that we are being appropriately staffing our classes. We are ending this year about 17.6 to 1 in terms of student to staff ratio. The McCleary fix bill is giving us funding for 17 to 1 staff to student ratio, or student to staff ratio, I should say. There is not compliance for the staffing ratio this year. There is compliance, I believe in 18, no, it's 1920. It's 1920. They got pushed out one more year. So beginning in 1920, we will have to comply completely with 17 to 1 if we want to continue to receive K3. Thank you. Yeah, it is the K3 17 to 1 measure. Healthcare benefits, we are receiving increased healthcare benefits, and we lucked out in our agreement with Primera that we are not receiving any rate increases. And then some other additional identified needs is, as we were developing our planning assumptions for the budget, we are adding staffing to the middle school and the high school for security coordinator positions that will be working with the students to supervise them throughout the day and help make sure that we're keeping the building secure and safe. We will be participating in the Puget Sound Education Services District Regional Threat Assessment Cooperative. I had an opportunity to attend the training for this cooperative a couple months ago with our Director of Special Education. And we were just blown away by what this cooperative is proposing to do and the amount of services that it will provide to our students. It's a model that's working. It originated in Salem, Kaiser, Oregon, and it is spreading like wildfire because of the success that they've had in terms of dealing with at-risk students. As well as upgrades to our communication systems. We're looking at upgrading all of the radios within our buildings as well as our bus repeaters. And we are currently in the process of having a study done to update that. We're also looking at some additional staffing support for programs and district level departments, as well as identifying training and program development needs. As part of the attempt to stabilize the budget last year, we cut our instructional coaches, which provided in-house professional development to the teachers throughout the year and mentorship. We're looking at redeploying these instructional coaches in the buildings and developing a richer, broader program of professional development. Any questions? Tom?
Not about this data specifically. Are you ending?
Yeah, the budget update's over. There's some more comment. We do have some information about enrollment projections.
I just have a budget question. It's not on your charts themselves. In order to become familiar with this meeting, I went back and did a little research, and I watched the October 25th, 26th meeting. And I think there was a very spirited discussion with the council and the school board regarding mental health counselors.
Councilmember Acker, can you speak into the microphone?
Oh, turned away. Sorry. There was a very spirited discussion on the mental health counselors. And then I took a little time and I called Adair Dingle today and just got some more context. And it's something I'm very passionate about. And I read your letter, and I'm very thankful that you took the time to write it, because there's been some new data out recently about suicides increasing in teenagers, anxiety's up. Kids are struggling with a lot of issues. It could be bullying, social media, divorce, the pressures of getting into college. Even sports. Sports are now year-round activities, and there's a lot of pressure on kids. And this service is not just for the kids that go to schools, but we also have an elder care population. And our city just got some data back from our city survey that indicated it's like a flip of a coin right now on whether or not a levy would pass. And I'm pushing very strongly to kind of do a carve-out for YFS. Counseling services, or the overall counseling plans. And I just want to make sure that the data that I'm referencing, the studies and the pressures that you all are seeing, are still consistent, and nothing's changed in the ask in the letter that you all sent.
Ralph, you're reaching.
Yeah, I think mental health counselors in the schools is the best practice for the safety of our students, both in suicide prevention and also much less common school violence, shooting. We lose 2 students a week in the state of Washington, which is 100, way too many. And for each student that takes their life, there's 17 attempts that result in hospitalizations. So yeah, it's the best practice CDC for actually minimizing both those risks. And I think these are the community's children, and it's a community responsibility. It's not an education dollar. We have those kids 15% of the time.
I actually have a couple just clarifying questions, if I might.
Yes.
The first one isn't actually, it's a statement. It's like, how did you not get any rate increases from Primera? But it's like, wow. So I'm sure there's good reasons, but that was astounding, and kudos to you, however you pulled that off. The other question that I had, so we had the chance, Donna, Tracy, Julie, and myself, to meet on Monday. And there was an outline, about some of the services that you're hoping, or let's call it resources, you'll be able to bring in hopefully in this coming year. There was also a comment from you where you were hopeful that you might be able to rehydrate some of your reserves. Is that going to be an element of the budget this year? So I understand you had to draw down in one or 2 previous years. Is that a plan for the district coming years?
We did need to dip into our reserves this year. as well as a little bit in the last year. Our goal is to maintain roughly about 2 months of payroll. In terms of just economic uncertainty, right now we have significantly less than that. If we can rehydrate some of our fund balance in the process, that would be fantastic. It is not, however, a key planning assumption that we drive money into our fund balance. My significant concern right now is making sure that with all of the increases that we've given our staffing and the money that we're receiving from the state, that we're putting money where it should be in the different buckets that we will be required to use it in, and making sure that we're expending all of our state money first, as well as meeting these the new demands that we have for additional staffing for safety and security and the different developmental programs that we would like to implement in the district. So if we can drive some in, that would be great. If we don't, then it's maybe next year.
Thanks. Celine?
Just in terms of all the changes, right? Your funding changes, levy changes, one-time funding changes. Obviously, you've lost your cadence, right? You had a cadence of levies and intervals, and now all that's changed. Your funding has changed, and your salaries are changed. When do you feel that you will kind of have full understanding, long-term planning, and strategy,
the long-term view,
the new cadence, the
yeah,
new set of rules?
It's as I said, we're brave new world. OSBI will not be issuing significant guidance until the 1920 school year. So it's most likely going to be after 1920 or mid-1920 that we will have a very stabilized long-term view of what it looks like. There are significant accounting functions, all the gears and works that have to go on behind the scenes that we are having to make changes for, that are eye-glazing in any public discussion. And that's taking a significant amount of time and effort, and we still don't know what OSPI is expecting of us in terms of how do we implement this, how do we implement that. So I'm going to have to say it's going to be about 1920 before we have a solid view. And most districts don't believe that the McCleary fix is fixed yet. We feel like there's going to be still stuff that goes on in the next legislative cycle or two, and it's not huge like the last two have been. But I know it's not. I wish it was. It's a habit. But hopefully there won't be any more significant changes, and we can get on with the business of trying to adjust to this new cadence. So.
Bruce, I'm looking at you.
You're looking at me because I passed out
a
a graph. I wanted it to get to people, but I don't want to preclude. I mean, at some point, I'd like to talk about this. You shifted to the topic of council.
Do we want
but I don't
to
want
keep
to get us
Ty
there.
here, or let him sit
It's
down?
really more of a question
Okay.
for this body than for Ty, and to the extent that we want Chip to speak first, I didn't want to get into that. So.
Yeah, we've got
Thank you, Ty.
approximately 7 to 10 minutes, so.
We thought we would just focus on kind of what our projected deficits are
You know, may I interrupt? I know Deborah and I were both at the presentation and saw it.
Oh, okay.
I'm wondering if the other board members have seen this presentation?
and we can
or
also
have.
email it.
You
Yeah, I think we've all seen at least
Okay.
a version of it. Maybe it's more updated now, but we. Yeah. Not that we don't want to hear from you, but we are short on time.
I think it's,
Not to talk.
I think the essence of it is it's 1.8 million in terms of deficit. Actually, I'm going to let you speak it because I don't want to be presuming. 1.8 and 2.0 for the next biennium. 1.8 general
Growing
fund.
to 6.8 in 2024. About $1 million a year.
Okay. I think that's
it.
those are the blunt figures,
That's a high
right?
level nutshell. Yes.
So I will step in then to to the gap that's created by that. Ralph, I think, made a good case for the importance of counselors. There's no doubt that there is a value in having them, and I think every one of us appreciates that and views them as an important resource. I think, though, for the city, we have a number of different priorities. We have to provide fire service to everybody. Every city does that. We have to provide police service. Every city does that. We have to take care of the roads. Every city does that. Counselors are not something every city does. They are something that different cities do to different degrees, and we actually, if I understand correctly, are the only city that has a mental health counselor in every school. So we are far above average in the sense that we deliver that service to our community. The chart I've handed out is CHIPS data plotted by me. My apologies for not putting my name on this. It was a bit of a scramble to put it together at the end. And I asked if staff had numbers going back further than 2007, but they didn't readily. But in 2007, we were at roughly a 50-50 split in the paying for the counselors. The school district at that point ran into financial difficulties and opted to call the counselors a low priority and drop their funding to what amounted to $60,000 at that time. The city opted to pick up that difference and continued to fund the counselors. And over time, of course, as you can see, the cost of that has increased. The school district has remained consistent at the $60,000 a year level. I point this out because we as a city have to deal with all of the needs, and we have to solve for all of those needs. You likewise have to solve for all of your needs, and you've made the decision that counselors are not a top priority for you because you've decreased the funding for them. And I think the place we get a little bit sideways with each other is when we have to solve the whole need, but the district believes that we should make the counselors the top need. And that's my reading of the letter saying you should go to the public with a levy for just the counselors and sort of set aside all of the other needs that you might have. I think it's perfectly appropriate to say, city, please help us with funding this. We consider it a top priority. But it goes a bit beyond when it tells us that it should be the top priority for the city when it's kind of falling off the bottom of the school district's list. So I want to point that out and say that I would hope that we could find ways to be collaborative throughout. And I think in the past we have, and I think it's really important for us to be that way. I would love for the district to contemplate increasing its share of the counselor cost with some of that money that has become available to you now. I would love for the district to recognize that we've got to solve for multiple needs, and as we come together with a plan that probably goes to the public and asks for dollars, the district is fully supportive of trying to get the public to support that so that we all succeed in having that money available. So I just want to put that out there as my sense of how we best work together in these kinds of problems, and honestly push back a little bit on the letter, which I felt was creating a rift between us that I felt was really not quite the right way to approach that.
First of all, I'd like to address your point about the priority. I would say that it's always been a priority of ours. By asking for help with funding it, it's not saying it's not a priority of ours. It's that it's the most logical place for us to ask the city for help. It doesn't make sense for us to ask for help with curriculum or teachers' salaries, but with something that is, like Ralph pointed out earlier in this meeting, affecting really all of our citizens and citizens that only spend 15% of their time in our schools. I think that helps it make a case for asking the city for help, and also because it makes sense in most models in most school districts when we have mental health counselors, they're not school district employees. it's the best practice to have those be outside agency employees for privacy's sake. And if those employees are best located within a city department like MIYFS, again, that makes sense that that would be an area where we would ask for support from the city. So by no means, in my opinion, I wasn't on the board at the time, does our request for support mean that it's not a priority for us?
And I would simply say that the request for support is a reasonable one. I have no complaint with that. What I was concerned about was that you also suggested how we should provide that, how we should structure that support, making it a higher priority than our other needs within the city. That was the point at which it felt like it was the district telling the city how it should prioritize its business. And we wouldn't, I think, want to encroach on your world in that way, and similarly would hope that you would respect that we have to solve all of the problems that we face.
So thank you.
Yeah, Ralph, I think, just Ralph and then Deborah, if
Okay.
that's
Let me speak to it. Thank you very much. And I think that we've always said thank you and appreciate the funds that you've provided. First and foremost, I think we need to recognize we've reached our levy capacity as a school district. The state doesn't allow us to fund anymore. Other districts actually can fund more and have higher rates. We're limited. And as a result, our community does heroic efforts, our PTAs, our schools foundation, to lift that. The city does have additional levy capacity, and many cities around the area use their levy capacity to support mental health. Seattle's done it for 20 years. We have talked on this island about a family levy like Seattle for over a decade, and it hasn't happened yet. Because we suggested, didn't tell, suggested and thanked a mechanism for standalone dedicated funds, it doesn't take this any ability to fund because you're still way within your levy capacity. If it's not dedicated, as Adair Dingle spoke last year, we always are talking about the same discussion every year. Every year. We could be talking about other things more creatively. Just 2 years ago, this council unanimously endorsed the Best Starts for Kids for King County, which is a wonderful program. It's structured to help kids at risk and in poverty. We have kids at risk, we have kids in poverty, not as much. We received $0 for that endorsed measure that passed. And we spend probably $2 million a year over the next 6 years, so it's $12 million, and we're getting zero back for that. And this council endorsed it as providing a brand new mental health clinic in Bellevue, Renton, and Vashon Island. 12 of the 15 King County school districts are receiving money from it. This council did the right thing to fund those other schools. All I'm asking is dedicated funding for our school.
Deborah, and then Julie, I think, are we going to need to wrap on the basis of time? Okay, and I think we'll have a couple closing comments too.
I just want to speak to the area of need. And in terms of the parent community on this island, I think the support for dedicated mental health counselors is something that, you know, we look to. And when we meet with other school boards, it's the envy of everyone. And as a public defender in King County for almost 20 years, primarily working with kids, I would hope that the council would equate mental health services for kids at the same level as law enforcement. You could probably ask Chief Holmes how many of their calls are domestic disturbances between teens and their parents. The best practice is to prevent those, not to have someone walking away in handcuffs. It doesn't solve anything, and it's going to happen again and again and again. We know that. It's best practice. It's why we've put the mental health counselors in place. They need to be where the kids are. The kids that need it the most aren't going to be able to get down to youth and family services. If they go to youth and family services, they always need parent permission, but there's a mental health counselor at all the schools that the students can reach out to, whether or not their parents are supporting them going into private mental health counseling. Many students don't have insurance that's going to fund mental health counseling, and yet with a sliding scale of Mercer Island Youth and Family Services, it still is likely going to be economically out of reach for many of our kids. It's sad to me that that YFS is part of an operating budget when law enforcement and fire is excluded. Obviously, we know the importance of that. It's not being considered for cuts. Law enforcement and fire.
I don't think we've made a decision.
Okay.
No decisions.
I know the
made at
primary look is at the operating budget, and I know Park and Rec and YFS have been at the top of the list being talked about. The statement that mental health counselors for the school district that it not be a priority is just an absolute misnomer. It's the highest priority of the district right now is social emotional learning. We know that if kids aren't mentally well, they cannot learn, and that we know is going to be a detriment to our community with violence, with crime, and with decrease in property values, which is going to decrease funds to the city. So we are asking this. The amount of support that we've gotten from the school community is tremendous. And as Ralph stated, I think that to be back here every year begging for money, if the school could do it, the school would do it. But we all know what school budgets are like, and we don't have the capacity to ask for any more.
I think I'm going to be cognizant of the fact that we have people walking in for the subsequent meeting. So the extent to which anybody's got a super short statement, I know Tracy actually has, I think, a fun challenge for us as a group that I want to make sure we have time for. Brian and Bruce, do you have just 10 seconds?
I'll be really brief. We've recently worked as a school board to pass Resolution 665, which had to do with school safety and gun violence prevention. We've also just partnered with Issaquah School District to put forth a resolution for the Washington State School Directors Association concerning the same thing. As a person who was living in Denver 20 years ago when the Columbine incident happened, following that all the way through, I want to bring the student voice into this room and the table when we discuss mental health care. We've been hearing from students across the United States who've been marching out, walking out of schools, marching to their city capitals, and demanding that we take action in order to create safer environments for them in our schools and our communities. One of the definite ways that we can help to create security, safe environments, and tighter communities is by providing follow-through mental health care for all of our students. And our model that we have right here on Mercer Island is the gold standard to have those follow-through services starting in school when they're there for that 6 hours a day, 5 days a week that will continue into the evenings, into the weekends, into the summers. This is how we create strong communities, and safe schools.
Okay, Bruce, just quick closing.
We can talk about our priorities, but at the end of the day, we put our dollars where our priorities are, and with all due respect, the district has opted to call this a low priority from a spending of the district perspective. And I think the city believes this is an important priority and is absolutely working to try and solve this, but we have to solve all of the problems we face, not just this one.
Great. Okay. Tracy.
All right. So on a lighter note, to end on a more positive thought, the school board would like to present a challenge to the City Council. The challenge would take place during a mutually acceptable date and time during summer celebration and at the location of the Island Park Field. Specifically, we would like to challenge you to a game of softball. The game would last 6 innings. Each governing board would be responsible for filling their team with their respective electeds, city manager, and superintendent. And spouses of those superintendent and city manager would also be eligible to play. Any additional spots on the team may be filled with district and city employees. And so I'll leave it at that, and we can discuss at a later date.
Okay, with that, meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
He said I could take all the credit.